Over the years, we've had a number of times when, and I think back to maybe particular weddings or at Christmas when the candles were lit and the church was kind of darkened and the sanctuary looked lovely. Candles, light, campfires, the gospel reading, the early words in Genesis, let there be light, the season of Epiphany, the season of enlightenment. Next Sunday, the season or the day of the Transfiguration. Jesus, it might be said, is a candle lighter. We read in John that in him was light, and the light was the light of people. And all you need to do is picture Jesus going to a group of fishermen by the Sea of Galilee, and he says, "Follow me." And their lives begin to take on purpose and meaning, because Jesus had, in essence, lit a candle in their life. One day, he was traveling with James and John, and he came across a man sitting at the side of the road, collecting taxes. And this person was collecting them at the expense of his own people. He had sold out to a foreign government. His name was Matthew, and it's the Matthew who wrote the gospel. But Jesus said to him, "Matthew, follow me." And no matter what Matthew had done in his life, no matter the mistakes he had made, Matthew that day closed his books on the past and opened a new door to the future. Christ had lit a fire in his heart. One day they brought a woman to Jesus who had been falsely charged, or at least charged, and was awaiting sentencing. They asked Jesus for his opinion. The Bible simply says he bent over and he began to write in the sand. What he wrote, we do not know. But they began to disperse. And he would say, "Let the one that is without sin cast that first stone." And I am convinced he lit a candle that day in that person's life, and that she would never be the same again. There was a man traveling to the city of Damascus, bitter, angry. His goal was to eradicate all traces of the fledgling Christian faith. But things changed. And a candle was lit in the life of St. Paul the Apostle that would never be extinguished. And he would travel all over Europe and parts of Asia, and he would proclaim that great message, because a light had come on in his life. Nicodemus, one of the teachers of the law, one of the most respected men in all of Judea, came to him one night after dark, and he said, "You have something I want. Tell me about it." Jesus said, "You have all of your religious ceremonies and your scriptures, but you need something more. And that is the message of Christianity at its heart and at its core. Jesus said, "I am the light of the world." But he also said, "You are the light of the world." And I I chose today to use this text and this theme to speak directly to those who are in leadership, because you are a light to those with whom you work. You have a great tradition and heritage within the guiding and scouting movements. And you have made, as was indicated in the letter, a profound difference. I am reminded of a story about a respected medical doctor. His name was Edward Rosenau, and he formerly was in charge of the Mayo Clinic years ago. He was a specialist in the field of bacteriology. In fact, he had helped provide a treatment and cure for infantile paralysis. And he was being interviewed one day, and he was asked why he decided to give his life to the study and to the cure of that disease. And he said this: as a boy, his brother had become seriously ill. The doctor arrived by horse-drawn wagon. Young Edward hid behind the chair. The doctor examined his brother. After a long moment, the doctor stood and he said to the parents, "It's okay. He's going to be all right." And the pale, drawn faces of his parents lit in such a wonderful way that little Edward Rosenau determined at that moment in his life that he wanted to do something that would cause people's faces to light up with new hope and with rediscovered joy. What a work it is. Jesus told the religious establishment of his day that praying and fasting and ritual, while maybe important, were not nearly enough. And he talked about principles that were difficult, such as forgiveness and love. And you're learning that in the scouting movement. There is another story. It's about a ball player, a well-known ball player, perhaps arguably, but some would say the greatest of all time, Babe Ruth. But it was late in his life, and he was in a game. He had been traded, and he was no longer the great athlete that he had once been. His body had failed, and in one inning alone, he was responsible for 5 runs scored by the other team. Sadly enough, as is often the case in this world, he walked off the field toward the dugout, hailed by a crescendo of boos and yelling. The little boy jumped over the fence, ran and threw his arms around the elderly Ruth, and the booing stopped. And he picked up that little boy and he hugged him and he set him down on his feet, and a hush fell over the stadium. Because you see, they realized that as great as he had been and as much of a hero as he was, he had time for that small young boy. When Karl Menninger was practicing, he was, of course, the well-known famous psychiatrist. He gave a lecture at the university on mental health. And they weren't asking him about any serious mental diseases, but rather, what do you do when you're feeling down and you're low, and you know that it could lead you to a depression? And they expected the famous psychiatrist to say, consult. But before that, he said, I want you to lock up your house and go out and find someone in need and do something to help. Jesus had said that 2,000 years before. Let your light so shine before others. You are to be commended as leaders, as guiders, as scouters. And beyond you, to those who are involved in many areas of life where the gospel has made an impact on you, you are to be commended. I close my message with one final story, and again it references a doctor by the name of A.J. Cronin. And he was a well-respected doctor. His first assignment was in Wales, at a hospital in Wales. His first operation he performed was quite routine. He watched over the patient to make sure that all had gone well. At midnight, he decided to take an hour to an hour and a half's rest. He asked a young 19-year-old to watch the patient. He gave instructions. The patient died. Apparently, the young person had panicked, made poor decisions. He reprimanded her. And then the next day, as he came in, he fired her. And she was full of remorse. And it was a mistake of grave consequence that could not be undone. But for several nights in his autobiography, Dr. Cronin said, I found it very difficult to sleep. I was very troubled. Something was bothering me. And so he said, I called in the person that he had dismissed. He said, I apologized to her. I reinstated her, and she went on to one of the most brilliant careers in medicine in the United Kingdom, becoming a senior administrator at one of their largest hospitals. You see, lighting candles can also be giving second chances, recognizing human frailty and human fault. But it is the bringing of hope. That's what it means to be enlightened. That's what the season of Epiphany is about, to be enlightened. We have often thought, as students in our Western society, that enlightenment is about facts accumulated and information shared. I would suggest to you today that enlightenment is about lives transformed. And this is an ongoing and never-ending process. We call it life. And I would also say one final thing to you who are in positions of leadership. No one sheds more light than Jesus Christ. And he gives to you and to me the joy of carrying on that work. It is a great work that you do. May God bless you as you continue to do it. It is a challenging work that you do. May God grant you the patience as you do it to the best of your ability. You are not expected to be perfect, but you are expected to be faithful. To God's name be the praise and the glory now and forevermore. Amen.